Welcome to the morning meeting, everybody. Thanks for joining on YouTube or here on the two-way platform. Great to have you here. If you'd like to be part of the conversation on the two-way platform, please raise your electronic hand. We'll get to you in a moment. Sean, as you can see, is on the move from an undisclosed location to an undisclosed location. Tim, you'll hear, sounds a little bit like Lauren Bacall today. So that's good news because I'm a big Bacall fan. And the interviews tonight. And so everything we say today, basically meaningless, but we'll fill up the time and talk to you about the debate, how the interview and how it's being prepared for. And we're going to talk a little bit about some new polls, including some Emerson polls from all the battleground states that show everything tied. Vice President Harris and her running mate continue their bus tour today. And statements that got decent coverage, although not huge coverage, in part because there was no news made. But the pictures are good, and Georgia TV covered it quite a bit. 1:45 Eastern is when they do the interview. We expect there'll be clips released between the conclusion of the interview and 9 p.m. Eastern time when there's an hour special. Still a lot of unanswered questions. Is there one-on-one time between Dana Bash and Harris? How long will the interview be? Is it all sit down? Is there walk and talk? Is there behind the scenes stuff? I don't know the answers to any of that. And so we'll have to see. Harris also is doing Vice President Harris is doing a speech in Savannah that is at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. We might have the clips by then. It's possible that they'll use an opportunity either around the event or as she boards the flight from Savannah back to Andrews at 7:15. If they need to clean anything up from the interview, that would be an opportunity for them to do that. I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. And then she lands in Washington, scheduled for 8:45, wheels down, 15 minutes before the interview starts. I'll be back at 10 Eastern time with a two-way to talk about the interview that you're welcome to join for. Donald Trump, two events today, one in Michigan called a messaging event. Interesting write-up in the Potterville or the Lansing newspaper about the Potterville event, which is that they're calling it a messaging event, not a rally. And the public was not really allowed to get into that, at least according to the Lansing paper. And then he's got a town hall in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Curious to see who's in that audience. Tulsi Gabbard will be part of that town hall, kind of hosting it. And that is in the evening at 7 Eastern time, I believe. Got it in here. I'm having trouble reading my own writing. Yeah, 7 Eastern. So two Trump events occurring between the interview and the taping of the interview and the hearing of the interview. If there are clips released, it'll give him an opportunity at those events potentially to respond. Joe Biden continues to be on vacation. J.D. Vance in Boston at 12:30, speaking to the firefighters, International Association, the firefighters that Waltz spoke to yesterday. And Waltz jumps off the bus tour after the interview, skips the Savannah speech, and goes to Raleigh for, I don't know if he's doing any public events or just fundraising. And Doug Emhoff is in Michigan today, and then Idaho raising money and doing a little bit of public stuff. So I want to talk first about the interview and then about some polling. There's a new Emerson set of polling data that came out after I put out my newsletter, put out the day book that we'll take a look at. But first, final thoughts, Tim, from you first. Just sort of your biggest thought about the newsletter. I mean, about the interview, rather. Sort of where's your head at on the interview at this point?
Yeah. So welcome to my voice this morning. We are getting through COVID, but this is still part of the aftermath. I think the interview is going to end up being sort of a non-event. I think it is something that we have hyped up on the Republican side for good reason, because they want to try to get 10 clips out of it. They want to try to find definable moments that are going to be problematic to push out. But I think at the end of the day, she will pass the interview. I think she is sitting down with her team and thinking about what is the headline that we want to get out of the interview? How do we bring questions back to defining the agenda that you want to talk about, which is this opportunity agenda, talking about how you're going to put the middle class first, and drawing a little bit of contrast with Donald Trump, potentially getting under his skin and triggering a response. So I think we will get through the interview. I think they're focused on a headline of Harris Walz tickets, sit for the first interview, outline their agenda, try to get under Trump's skin, try to get out, And then maybe there are more interviews scheduled in the future, because I do think we got to a point where the pressure has been ratcheted up so high, at least on the Republican side, on this one interview that we're going to look back on and say that wasn't super meaningful. They'll think about the path forward.
Sean, big picture thoughts about the interview?
Yeah, I just want to remind Tim to use his pronouns properly. It's not her interview, it's their interview now. Look, she had promised that she would do an interview. And this idea of moving him in, this notion that there's nothing traditional about this race. Normally, the nominee would have done several interviews by themselves prior to this. So to try to play this off to tradition is kind of a joke, because it's not traditional in any sense of the word. I disagree with Tim. I think the stakes are particularly high for both Harris and Waltz. And then secondly, for CNN and Dana. What does she ask? What does she not ask is going to be, in my opinion, very, very critical, because Tim's right. The Republicans have definitely ratcheted this up, but it's not just for her. It's for CNN as well. If they don't pressure her on Joe Biden, what she knew and when she knew it, on her stance on abortion, on why she had flip-flopped on so many issues, I think that's going to be a problem. So it's as equally important for her as it is for CNN.
Let me ask you guys a question. If it's assuming that part of the interview, which we were led to believe, is the three of them sitting someplace, okay? I don't know why she would ever ask Waltz a question. I would greet him warmly, and then I would say goodbye to him warmly, and I would never ask him a question if I were doing the interview. But what would you tell Tim? What would you tell Waltz he should do to avoid looking like he's bailing her out? Because if there's a moment like that, it seems to me that's where the interview would go south. If she says something wrong or off key, and he comes in and says, well, I think what the vice president means is, seems to me that's a disaster potentially. Yeah. So what would you tell him his posture should be about jumping in? Like, under what circumstances should he jump in?
I do think like Tim Walz is the right person for that type of to be handling that type of a situation, a joint sit down interview, even going back to how he interviewed with the vice president when he was running for the job, which is he understands that he is there to be helpful, right? And so if there are questions that are directly put to him, then yes, you answer those questions. But yeah, I don't think he would do this, but yeah, the answer is pretty clear. Don't jump in and course correct if you feel like there's a course correction on an answer. You don't even really need to jump in order to add additional color or flavor or a thought on a question. Unless a question's put to him, he doesn't really need to jump in. Or she turns to him or mentions him in answering a question, which is also a possibility. I mean, I think the good-natured vibe between the two of them is real. So I think we'll see that play out a little bit, and that like she may draw him into a question. But to your point, yes, like don't, and I don't think he will approach us as like time to bail out.
Tim, I want to stay with you. So if you look back,
I would just concur. It's the easy way to put it. I concur with Tim's assessment.
Yeah. So Tim, if you look back at the Lester Holt interview, okay, she has this moment where she says, I haven't been to Europe either. And as far as I could tell, as a consumer of news, as a journalist, they didn't really do anything to clean that up, really ever, but certainly not in real time. So again, just take people behind the scenes, like how, if you were Brian Fallon, if you were part of this team, how would you prepare and deal with if she says something, particularly if CNN puts it out this afternoon, that's a moment like saying, I never have been to Europe either. How should they deal with that? Should they trot her out? Should they have an aide on background? How should they deal, or not how should they, but how do you think they're preparing to clean up as they need to?
Yeah. Well, I think all of the above options are always available, right? Like in not knowing how the interview will go, although I would predict it's not going to go terribly and you wouldn't need to bring her out to do secondary cleanup, but that's possible. You could do press conference afterwards. Could issue statements by aides on background. But I think also part of the question is preparation, right? Like you are walking into this interview and it is a pressure cooker. It's been created as a pressure cooker. And so that is what that environment is going to feel like. And I think one of the last things you are doing as you sit down with your candidate is to remind them to avoid contention, right? Like the last thing that you want to do in this interview is to come off as contentious. And I think that they're going to take the opportunity to use this as a moment where there will be a decent number of eyeballs. Not the DNC, it's not the debate, it's not any, but a bunch of people are going to watch this on social media afterwards to remind your candidate to always pivot back to a positive agenda that you want to push out. Now, you're also going to be watching, your staff is going to be watching what the Republicans are doing during this time, because Republican, RNC research, the account that whenever an interview happens, clips 10 moments, pushes them all out and sees what goes viral. You're going to be tracking that as well, because that's going to be generally the source of where you identify where your pushback needs to happen. And that might happen online. Your point, that might happen offline.
Right. So, Sean, I want to ask you a question, but Tim, I want to correct you on one thing. The second most thing she shouldn't do is be contentious. The first most thing she shouldn't do is laugh at an inappropriate moment. I say that would be worse.
It is fair. I mean, I think I think that's right, because Republicans will absolutely run with it for sure.
Yeah. So, Sean, I want to ask you another tradecraft question. As a consumer of RNC and Trump war room content, right? It seems to me that one mistake, and the DNC and the Democrats do this too, is they put out a kitchen sink of this thing, that thing. Like, she said this, and she said 8%, it was 9%, right? Like high volume, and some things that reporters are going to look at and say, that's like a quibble. That's not like some breakthrough thing. What's the calculus for the RNC and the Trump war room tonight? Do they do kitchen sink, and as Tim suggested, see what catches on? Or would they be smarter, and would you advise to say, look, let's wait for something significant, and if a significant thing happens, let's make a big deal of that. If not, we can do a bunch of little things, but let's not real-time react to any little thing that it's just going to cause reporters to stop reading the press releases and the tweets.
See, I think in the premise of your question, you're asking what reporters will do. And I think we've moved beyond that in this cycle. So what reporters care about, and we've talked about this on various other issues that have come up that have, for example, the stolen valor thing. I think for a lot of reporters who've never served, who aren't around veterans or people in the military, they don't get it. So you'd never expect them to understand that issue. But it touched a nerve with a particular community. And
all right. Worried about that. Let's bring Alex Castellanos, the Sparky Lyle of Republican consultant strategists today. Alex, thank you for joining. In from the and we're in the age now where you have to trot in. There's no cart to drive you. What's your view of? And you texted me something. I want you to say it after you answer the question. Is what's your view of quantity versus quality? I think Sean's wrong. I think the traditional media still matters on this stuff. And if you want to drive some big moment, like in her Lester Holt interview, you're better off not flooding in real time versus waiting to see if there's something big. What's your view of that? And then tell everybody what you texted me. Not the first text about you like my shirt, but the second text about.
Second thing, I think the big mainstream media matters a whole lot to the general election voter outside the bubble, the people who are beginning to tune in after Labor Day. I think we all get a little caught up in the inside game because it's what we live and breathe. So, yeah, I think creating some big mainstream media events is something you do judiciously, not flooding the market. But my take on the CNN interview today with Harris is that she's got to do this pretty well. I think Tim is right. They give her 3 hits on Trump to deliver, no matter what the question is. They give her some genuine, rehearsed, prepared spontaneity, and she'll be just fine. But the big story to me is that it's defense. This is where you begin to leak. She's out there not to screw it up. And so this is like Napoleon's march out of Russia. You slowly begin to lose, drop in the survey numbers. And this is how Hillary Clinton was ahead at this point in the campaign and begins her decline. So she didn't reach escape velocity at the convention. And when you don't reach escape velocity, what happens? Well, you begin to come back to earth. And to me, this is the first day of that.
Yeah. All right, let's put up the Emerson poll. These came out just not that long ago, and it's all the battleground states. And basically, I think my takeaway from the Emerson numbers is every one of the 7 states is in play. I continue to believe that, as I said yesterday, that I think the Harris is going to have to fight to stay competitive in the Sun Belts, but she could. And again, people I think psychologically will look at these polls, compare them to the Fox numbers, and turn it into something like psychologically like it's a basketball game. Like, oh, yesterday Harris was down 2 and now she's up 1, so she's got momentum. These are all well within the margin of error. And I'll remind you all about how margin of error works, right? These Emerson polls, it says the margin of errors is somewhere between 2.8 and 3.6. That applies to both candidates. That means that if someone is down, if it's 3.6, if someone is down 6 points, they could still be ahead under the dimensions of the poll. We still don't know a lot about the likely voter screens and how effective they are. I look at these numbers and I say basically the only takeaway is all 7 states are currently in play. Tim, thoughts?
No, I mean, I completely agree. This plus the Fox polls from yesterday. I just think directionally, I still feel good being the Harris-Walz campaign with a 5 to 6 point bump where we saw the Sun Belt states in particular sliding away, where we saw North Carolina not even really, well, maybe North Carolina, honestly, a little bit more than Georgia, with Biden at the top of the ticket in contention. And now we have 7 true battleground states. I think it feels good.
Alex?
I think it's jump ball everywhere. I would say that Democrats have an advantage. Looking at these numbers, I would give Democrats a little extra bump for early voting prowess and the machine. I would give Trump a little bump because he has the shy Trump voter in some of these states more than others.
Yeah. Let's put up Patrick Ruffini's tweet. Again, Patrick, who I hope we have on here regularly. He's always got a mysterious scheduling conflict, but he's a really smart guy and he's a pollster and a strategist. And he says this. He says you got to look at the Trump marginal voters in the states are different. That in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, the Rust Belt states, it's working class rural and people who until recently voted Democrat. In the Western states, the marginal Trump voters, working class urban. In the 2 Southern Sun Belt states, it's rural, but has leaned R for decades. I think that general characterizations are right. And again, I think he's right. If you start to look at crosstabs, that's what you have to consider. It's not one size fits all in all 7 states. I did a little exercise this morning and I said, normally, I take the battleground in a normal cycle, I take the battleground states and I list them top to bottom. Which ones are most likely, from the most likely to go R or D to the least likely? In this case, I think we can all agree, maybe you guys will disagree, Wisconsin is the most likely to get, if you're putting them in order of strength for Harris, Wisconsin would be number 1 of the 7. After that, I find it very hard to rank any of them. People continue to tell me, Trump is strong in Arizona. He's got it in the bag. Democrats say, no, it's their best of the Sun Belt states in some cases. So I'm just wondering if you guys feel the same way, or if you think you could rank order the 7, say for Harris, Wisconsin 1, what would you put 2? Michigan, maybe at this point?
I mean, I think I would put Michigan. Yeah, but I think to your point, it gets harder beyond that, right? I think
like what would you put 3rd, Tim?
Yeah.
It's hard. Third, Michigan,
it's hard.
Wisconsin, Michigan, and then it's hard after that because Pennsylvania is a tough state for them right now. And I don't know about the others. You could make an argument for literally any of the other 4 of any of the Sun Belt states to be number 3. And then Pennsylvania is probably 4 or 5, but hard to know. All right, let's open it up. Bring folks in again. I'd love to see some more hands up of new folks. If you haven't asked a question before, not too late to raise your hand to get in today's episode. Let's start with Dan. Dan, come on in. Tell us where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Good morning. I am from the suburbs of Philadelphia. I am leaning heavily towards Harris. My question is,
who'd you vote for in 16 and 20, Dan?
16, I voted for Johnson, and 20, I voted for Biden.
Okay. And why are you not automatic for Harris?
I do have some hesitation about sort of the direction of the Democratic Party. I was traditionally a Republican. I left the party after January 6th. So I lean a little bit more conservative. So that would be my concern going too far left.
But is it possible you'll vote for Trump or is that ruled out?
That's ruled out. Yeah.
Okay. So you'll vote for Harris.
It's either going to be Harris or a non-vote.
Got it. Okay. Go ahead, Dan. Question.
Yeah. So I first of all, love this format. It's been a great experience just to hearing all these points of view. Some I agree with, some I disagree with. But one theme I hear constantly is primarily about Harris right now is this whole concept of flip-flopping on issues, and does she need to really come to terms with that and provide an explanation? I also hear that a little bit on the Trump side. He tends to be a little bit of a chameleon on some of his issues over his lifetime as well. But my question is this: at what point in time do we view that as governance? As someone who's sort of in the middle, I like the fact that, she may have changed her mind, whether it's just a political calculus or, hey, I have to govern everyone. So I guess I'm just interested in everybody's points of view on why, not just in the quote unquote media, but also in forums like this, we find that so objectionable when a person is trying to move towards the center.
I mean, I'll start and just say, I think moving is fine for voters and substantively if you've got an explanation. Why is she suddenly for fracking? She became for fracking as part of the administration, kind of implicitly. But is there new data that she's seen? Is it concerns about inflation? Is it concerns about competing with Russia for energy? I think there got to be an explanation. Donald Trump actually, at times, has explained his position, his shift on abortion. You have to look closely to find it, but he has talked about seeing sonograms, etc. I think that worked for some people. Alex, Tim, what do you guys think of Dan's question?
I think one of the magic things about politics is how we govern our governors. They respond to pressure from the public, from us. So yeah, I think they can, let's say, evolve. But I think Mark is right. When you're dealing with criminals or politicians, you need to understand their motives, and otherwise they're inauthentic. And if they're inauthentic, we don't believe them, and they become self-serving politicians. So when does that happen? I think Harris missed a big moment at the convention to say, listen, the nation has changed. The Democratic Party is evolving. We're moving. We hear you, American people. We're right about some things. We got a lot to learn on others. What would you do in real life if you had an awakening? We expect our politicians to act like, respond, do the things that a decent person would.
I do think,
Tim?
I do think as part of this interview, right, there's a prepared answer to some of this, right? Like I would not imagine that she's walking into this interview without some explanation of evolution on, an issue. Maybe fracking is the issue. But I also do want to say, I think, Mark, to both your point and to Alex's, like an evolution on an issue does not need to be totally damning. I think sometimes the frame with which we view the flip-flop question is like John Kerry 2004, and like that is the only lens through which we can understand it, when it was like the number one issue on everyone's mind. It was the Iraq, where the framing and the elevation of that issue and the like senatorialness that he brought to answering some of those questions, I think was very different. But I think we think about it in that way quite a bit. Dan, one question I have for you is, as you're thinking about voting for Harris, are you going to watch the CNN interview?
Oh, sorry, Dan, you're muted. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I will.
Yeah. All right. Come back tomorrow. Let us know how it was, whether it moved you. Dan, thank you. All right. Special treat for everybody. A double dose of, now maybe you guys don't pronounce your same ways. Do you, Sandra? Or does one of you? All right.
That's okay.
You both
Yes.
familiar to the platform, but not everybody, because we've got lots of new folks. So Sandra S., remind everybody where you are and who you're supporting. Then Sandra G., you'll do that, and then you'll both ask your questions.
I'm in Pennsylvania, the Lehigh County, formerly from Luzerne County, and center left.
And supporting Harris.
And supporting Harris, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sandra G.
Okay. I usually vote in Florida. I live in Germany. I'm registered Democrat. They are switched this year for fear that something would go wrong. I'm planning on voting for Trump.
Okay.
First time voting Republican.
Okay. Sandra, you first from Pennsylvania. What's on your mind?
I guess what I wanted to say is I do have a different feeling in Pennsylvania after talking to friends and family, young and old, 30-year-old woman. Can I just give you an example of what she said that really kind of blew me away?
Please do.
Her and I had spoken about reproductive rights. She was all for, choice. And so I said to her, "Are you excited about Kamala?" She said, "Not in the least." Oh, okay, why? And she said because she flip-flopped, but she said, I want to be able to own a home, and I don't think I'm going to be able to. I have student loans that pay back. They didn't take care of my student loan. They were real small schools. I went to a state school. The other one was a 65-year-old in my family who owns a small business. Both of us grew up in the same family, a union family, Democrat in the Luzerne County. We voted Democrat every time. And he tells me, and I don't know if this is true, if there's any small business people on the line, that they, under Biden, have not been able to bid on government jobs, or they're boxed out. I don't know. And I actually, he got really, really hot on this. And I said, well, I am on two-way and I'm going to listen to you. And you could listen there too to learn. But he is all in for Trump. He didn't vote for Trump in 2020.
So you're saying, based on your personal experience,
Yes.
You think things may be drifting towards Trump, even with people who might be considered Harris voters?
Correct. And that the margins were close in 2020. It's going to be really close, I think.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Stand by, because I want Sandra interaction here in a moment. Sandra, I'm going to warn our affiliates we're going to go a little bit over today, but you take the floor and tell us what's on your mind.
Okay. I was watching yesterday, I think the communication director for Harris tried to explain her switch concerning fracking. And the more I listened to him, I thought, even he's having a hard time trying to explain or find words or, to explain why she would change. So I'm imagining
he did a crappy job. His boss better do a better job than he did.
So I thought, okay, good luck to her. Even if they train her and prepare her, it's not going to come across as authentic, I think. Concerning the polling, I'm trying to understand, let's say the Rust Belt states, if you look at the borders, can in one state a particular segment of the population vote a specific way, and immediately across the border, let's say in Ohio, which is Republican, the people would vote a different way, because it's basically the same. Population.
So there's a ton of political science and political professional literature on this. Ohio and Iowa, both states Obama won twice, contiguous to these other states, and yet they're now firmly red. And again, there's people who study why that is. Pennsylvania, the consensus is a worse state for Biden or for Harris than Michigan and Wisconsin, even though it's more of the Northeast, which is, of course, the strongest area for the Democrats. We don't have time to go into some of the reasons. Some of it has to do with demography. Some of it has to do with economics. But I consider it something of a mystery that Ohio and Iowa are just off the table now, when not that long ago they were competitive. Tim or Alex, you guys want to give a quick political science lesson about why these differentiations exist in states that are contiguous?
No, it's easy. I'll defer to Alex mostly in this, but it's easy to sort of blob the middle of the country together and say that about the Midwest or the Heartland. Being from Minnesota, I try not to. I won't take offense. But I think it is, Mark, to your point. Some distinctions in college education, some distinctions in income level, some distinctions in different professions that people choose. Those communities, particularly those like white working class communities, do have just some distinctions in them that lean them one way or the other.
Alex?
If Doug Sosnick were here, he'd say education makes a big difference. I've tried hard getting a little smaller We used to live in larger communities. Now we are more fragmented. So hey, the different side of the street can mean the world. But the other thing you were saying about the explaining flip-flopping on these things, it all takes place in context of politics, and we don't trust politics because the good thing about it is they respond to our pressure. The bad thing about it is they respond to our pressure. And so are they doing this for their own good, for their own political success? Corporations lose their way when they start thinking, oh, the little people don't understand what a great product we made. Sure, we made some mistakes and poisoned people, but politicians do the same thing. The point is, when do they become more interested in themselves than in us? And we're always trying to judge that. That's why we need motive.
Yeah, I want to sneak Governor McCrory in to do the benediction, but just quickly, one word answers from both of you. Sandra asks, who's going to win the presidential election?
Oof.
I hope Harris, but I think Trump.
Okay, and Sandra G, who's going to win?
If I base it on history, I think Trump has always been underrepresented.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Thank you both. Come back often. Love having you both on. Governor McCrory, please deliver the benediction for today's episode. What's on your mind?
The benediction for tonight is it's high risk to bring a subordinate to a joint interview. I would have never done it as a mayor with my mayor pro tem. I would have never done it as a governor with a lieutenant governor. And any good reporter would try to divide them like they would with Vance or Trump. The second item, as you talk about the Sunbelt states and look at surveys, since COVID, we really don't know the demographics. So many people have moved from New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And we don't know who they are and how they're going to vote. And that could be a major game changer in these Sunbelt states as compared to just 4 years ago. So that's my benediction.
All right. We'll close our eyes and bow our head in prayer and say, amen. Governor McCrory's right. This makes the likely voter screen even more complicated. You got a bunch of people you just don't know, having moved, whether they're going to vote and, of course, how they're going to vote. So, Governor, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alex, thank you for stepping in for Sean, who hopefully is still on the move to his undisclosed location. Tim, we hope you feel better. Again, 9:00 interview on CNN. We're not going to watch it together, but we'll convene at 10:00 Eastern time and talk all about it and get everybody's reaction. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you at 10 Eastern time. And then again, 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, right here, same bad time, same bad channel with Lauren Bacall and the Driving Man. Thank you all.